Okay, welcome again to Sunday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. My glasses are broke, so they're making me feel crazy with how silly they look. But anyway, I'm going to get through it. Try not to laugh too hard as I continue to do that. But welcome again to show prep for the rest of the heathen community because nobody else is thinking along these lines. So, as I said, we're working on this leadership and recovery idea. The idea behind it is you can't lead yourself. You're not really going to get anywhere. If you're waiting on someone else to do it for you, which most people are, you're always going to be in that boat. You're always going to be dealing with someone else's problem. And that's one of the things that drives me craziest about the modern workday environment in America is you get these narcissistic types of individuals in there that will say, well, I can't because they ain't doing. I can't because do you see what I have to do because they're not doing their job and it's just terrible and this is going downhill and this place is falling apart without me and I can't because they can't because they're lazy and they'd rather blame somebody else and boost their ego instead of taking care of it themselves. Instead of being grateful they have a job to begin with. These are the kind of individuals that are the most prominent at that kind of polite character assassination known as water cooler gossip. What is this step 4 we got to talk about? And some people leave this out. And I know there's some 9-step programs out there because they don't want to indulge in some Christian ideology. But what you have to remember is that everything in the Bible comes from a much older pagan source. Everything. So everybody's getting confused about, well, it's too heavily Christianized. Well, no, jackass, it came from a much older pagan source. And there's a reason why it was put in that Bible. But for our purposes, we live a pagan lifestyle, right? We want to know what these examples are and what they mean. This first thing is we made a searching, step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives become unmanageable. In our version of it, our life had become unmanageable. We were using alcohol to try to manage it, right? Well, how do we overcome that unmanageability? How do we overcome that thought process that corrupts our problem, our thinking so much that the best thinking we come up with is, well, I'll just get drunk at it. Well, we start by saying the ABCs of gratitude. If you ain't tried it yet, I don't want to hear your opinion on it. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, what exactly would that look like? Are we insane? Well, look at some of the stuff we've done. I'm pretty sure that it can be classified as certainly not normal, right? So what would that power? We all want to believe in the divine. If we're here worshiping these pagan divinities, these divine beings that we consider the gods of our ancestors, we obviously believe that there is a power greater than ourselves. And that's the thing that we only need to work on. Is there a power greater than myself? Yeah. That tree out there is a power greater than yourself because the only thing it knows how to do is grow, and it continues to do it no matter what's going on around it. Something we can't seem to figure out. Okay, so maybe I'm a little insane. The tree knows more about it than I do. 3, made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God who understood him. Well, we changed that a little bit to aligning ourselves with the examples of the gods that we worship. Be they Kemetism, your Hellenistic, your Norse paganism, your also true Hindu, aligning ourselves with these ideas and examples that these gods and these ancient tales tell us. Okay? Because until we do that, it's going to be very difficult for us to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now, why is that even remotely important? That's just confession. We don't need to do that. We can pay shield and be done with it. And once we go to jail and do our time, we're finished with it. Well, let's look at what the definition of morality is. And I'm going to read it so nobody can say I paraphrased it and got screwed it up. Morality, principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. A particular system of values and principles of conduct. 3, the extent to which an action is right or wrong. All of our pagan mythologies, every single pagan faith and spirituality has the distinction between right and wrong and good and bad behavior. It has a particular system of values and principles of conduct. And it tells us to what extent an action is right or wrong. So when we learn how to live up to and align ourselves with these principles and ideas, well, it seems like we might need to learn a little bit about them, right? So how do we search and make a fearless inventory of ourselves? Well, I mentioned the 12 labors of Hercules, right? So here's an example of how to come out of that, how to identify that. Where's an area that you weren't courageous? Tell me, write down a time that you failed to overcome a fear and a challenge with strength and determination. Tell me the time that you were sitting there on the hot seat and you were the one that was being questioned. You were the one that was in trouble, but your answer was, he did this. It was all their fault. I can't because. That's cowardice. So one of the 11 principles of leadership is to seek responsibility and take responsibility for your actions, even when it sucks. Because one of the things that keeps people drunk is that reminder of, you really screwed that person over. Save your own ass. And you look like a fool because of it. Everybody else knows it. Everybody else knows it. They're not going to say it. They're just going to deal with you. But you're the one that's going to drink about it. Right? Where did you fail to overcome the obstacles that you keep setting in your path? People like alcoholics and drug addicts are prominent for being, well, they're usually intelligent and capable, meaning individuals in society, and they can build up for themselves a great future and then piss it all away in a fit of anger or resentment or blaming someone else because they failed to overcome. They will set that roadblock in their way time and time and time again. And also with relationships. Why did I screw that woman over? Why did I screw that man over? Why did I go do this? Why did I do that? When I had someone that, well, maybe that he wasn't good enough for me and I deserve better. Maybe I deserve. Now, if they're beating your ass, if they're being fucking mean, dip out on that shit. But this idea that, well, if I go with this individual, my life will be a little bit better. It'll be a little bit easier, and I won't have to do as much, and I'll be set because I'm married to this individual. Yeah, that means invariably that you're going to screw somebody else over and leave someone behind. Sometimes it's necessary. Symbol of self-control. Being a drunk, a drug addict doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you don't care as much. It removes the intensity of giving a damn about someone else. When we look over courage, resilience, perseverance, self-control, part of these 9 noble virtues that are also four of the 12 labors of Hercules, we begin to see a pattern emerging, right? Hey, good evening. What are we doing with ourselves? When we begin to take that moral inventory, that's us sitting down and writing, taking that good, long, honest looking appraisal and saying, okay, I did this wrong. Well, they did that. And that's not, nobody gives a fuck what they did over there. Right? That's Loki. That's why he's such a prominent example throughout our lore. Everybody says, well, he got us out of this situation. He got us into that situation. Well, but he got it. No. If you look at his pattern of action, Odin and Frigg build this great golden age of Asgard. He has a girlfriend. Loki has this girlfriend, Sigyn, right? He runs off into the dark woods with Angrboda to try to do the same thing. And what does he create? The monsters that devour the world. It's the same thing for ego-driven individuals in the middle, in the cusps of the worst of their drinking and drug addiction. They will think they can do the same thing they see this person over here do with impunity. They'll run off over here, pick up Sally from back behind the alley, and try to create something great. And the only thing they're going to do is create the monsters that are going to destroy their world. Because if their pullout game ain't any good, next thing you know, there's 3 kids they got to pay for the rest of their lives. Good luck coming from behind that. Good job, right? So So we have this idea of Loki that represents the uninspired human intellect, the ego run amok, which is the most prominent character idea that goes with an alcoholic or drug addict, because they don't accomplish anything. But you will find them at 10 a.m. at the bar talking about how great they are and the great things they've done and what they've achieved and how good they are in business and all the other things that go with it. And yet at 10 a.m., when everybody else is working and making money, they're just talking about it. Just like Loki. Bartering away things that don't belong to him to run a hustle, to get his ass out of the sling, right? Then you have the 12 labors of Hercules, who lost everything. And after he lost everything, he was something much different. And he had these 12 labors to go through that represent what I just talked about, right? That he had to develop, that he had to reestablish the ideas of courage in his own life, resilience, perseverance, self-control, strength, focus, right? Purification, all of those things. Same thing with the two kings at the beginning of the prose edda. For some reason, they're looking for something better. And in their looking for something better, they tried to be something they weren't. They wanted to make sure they weren't suckered, so they disguised themselves as something else to seek truth of the matter. Just like an alcoholic. Instead of being who he was supposed to be, I'll sit here and talk about how great I am, the ego. And that way I don't really ever have to do anything. Don't really ever have to live up to it. Because I talked about it. I mean, that counts, right? Because I was talking about it. Okay, you keep telling yourself that. Now, the most interesting thing comes from the idea of Bacchus or Dionysus. What does Bacchus represent, right? Let me see if I can share this real quick. Probably not. Dionysus represents that shattering idea. And it's no accident that he is a god of wine and merrymaking and many other things. That which is for it to become something else must be shattered. There are few things in the world that will level the playing field for a weak man as being a drunk. It will break him down faster than you can imagine. And everything about who he is at that time must be shattered so he can become who he is supposed to become. That sun flows in. The solar idea behind Dionysus is that sun is flooding this earth with energy every day. Pure, unfiltered, unadulterated energy that gives everything on this planet room to grow, reason to grow, the reason to struggle to survive, right? Look at the plants in the forest. They're all staggered. They're all struggling for some sunlight, right? People, bugs and birds and worms and everything else feeding off those plants, other things feeding off those plants. And then when the big things die, they sit in the sun and they decompose and they rot and they return back to the earth and then fertilize and enrich it. And then I'll be damned if something else doesn't grow from it as soon as it gets the sunlight. The all-powerful idea of solar energy that powers everything on this planet. There's a lot of intricate systems involved in that, much as there are in the thought process of any individual who's completely wrapped up in the ego of, I'm great because I think I am. Descartes may not necessarily have been correct when he said, I think, therefore I am, because we are much more than the collection of thoughts running through our heads. We are the energy behind that observes all of it. What gets in the way of that? The ego. This idea that I'm great simply for the thinking of it is absolute horseshit. Dionysus was the radical destruction and recreation of that, right? And what's interesting is the origin of him, the tale of him, the twice-born deity from a virgin on December 25th, who was crucified and then ascended into heaven, much like Jesus, much like Hercules, much like Balder, much like Odin, much like Shiva, much like Buddha, right? See, that list never stops. Imagine that. A story that's repeated through it of, okay, I've got to destroy part of me, the ego, so I can become what I'm supposed to become. Dionysus is closely associated with Shiva. Both originated from Mount Nisa, right? The tales of Dionysus' journey through India are well documented by Herodotus. Shiva was the same thing. The same thing occurred with that great deity of the Hindu cosmology. Across all those cosmologies, there's an idea there that the radical destruction of who and what we are requires that we understand what that is. It don't have to be no great, big, complicated thing. It's all that stuff that keeps you awake at night when you're laying there trying to go to bed. And you're thinking about, man, I shouldn't have done that. God dang it, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do this? Why did I do this to this individual? Now, the arrogant part of us would be, because I don't care what happens to them. This world is for me. And that's the level you operate in this world. Period. Those individuals that wish to move out of where they currently are usually only do so because they are in extraordinary, difficult, suffering pain. They have failed. Just changing the behavior is correct. Change you change your thoughts, you change your reality. To change your thoughts, you change your reaction to certain things, your actions involving a certain thing. You begin to change the behavior. Those individuals that cannot do that because they lack courage to do so, most narcissistic individuals, alcoholics, drug addicts, so on and so forth, who would rather, I'm just going to keep on going and never take the inventory, never go through the shattering concepts of shattering what is to create something more that is new. That's the example of all of those deities that were crucified, died, and were reborn. All of them, including Dionysus, they represent that very powerful energy. And we have been set in front of us that same concept, and we ignore it with everything we have because, well, I don't really want to admit that I did that. That might hurt. Yep, probably. I don't want to admit that I've done this or I've done that. I don't want to. Okay, yeah. Well, now you've got all of it. Now you've come to a point in your life where to go forward any further requires so much pain with each step to continue moving forward. Look at the homeless person on the street. How many steps do you think they shuffle every day going to make sure they get something to eat and a bottle of beer to drink, or maybe whatever drug happens to be on the street? They hustle harder than most of us do, just so they don't have to deal with cowardice, ego, the destruction of the self to become something new. And yet here we are trying to use an ancient faith to do it. An ancient cosmology that was the cosmology of our ancestors. Remnants of it still exist throughout the world. And we're sitting here going, I'm going to be a proud beer-swilling Viking. I'll be a manly man and do manly things. Well, the courage to sacrifice yourself to yourself is the manliest thing that I can think of. And that was given to us as an example by Odin, by Hercules, by Dionysus, by Shiva. Balder sits with the goddess Hel to learn all of the knowledge of everything that's passed on. This idea of taking a fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves is critical for one thing: changing that thought pattern to change the behavior. You will not move forward otherwise. You will have the same problem every time you are in that same situation, and your thought patterns will be such that you will go through that again and again and again and again in life until you figure it out. Some people never do. You see at their funerals, well, he was a good man and he worked for 44 years at whatever factory bullshit thing, and then he retired and became active in the church. And that's it. Some of them, no great war have they fought, right? That thing with Tyler Durden on Fight Club is not too far off the mark for most of us. We have no great war. Our war is a spiritual one. There's no Great Depression. The Great Depression is our lives. Well, the only thing I can tell you about that is give it time, it'll change. So now we're facing our own spiritual war. We're facing our own Great Depressions, and we can't get our thoughts right. Well, if my life is unmanageable, if I've made a mess of everything about it because I've been acting an ass in this way or that way or that way, maybe if I have the courage that these ancient tales offer me, I might be able to take a little inventory and say, okay, yep, I did that. I got to fix that. I need to change my thinking that's centered around all of that so I can change my behavior and move forward. Right? It requires action. And this is the first action. The first three of these steps are simply making a decision, doing some thinking. This one requires, okay, if you're serious about the first three, now it's time to do some work. What kind of a piece of shit were you exactly? That's a scary thing. Like I've said before, the primary defining characteristic of knowing Bryan Wilton is that I will disappoint you. And I say that, and it sucks. There's a part of me that's got a little bit of ego that says, yeah, there's a bunch of other motherfuckers that do the same thing. The radical accountability is correct. But the why of it is the most important part. See, most people never grasp that their ego, the one that's been ruining their lives, is the part that we have to destroy. The destruction of the ego is one of the most important things that we will ever accomplish. That's why it's so prominent in all of these tales of these deities of the death and the rebirth. The death of the ego allows for the rebirth of an individual in a way that most people will not be able to even recognize them. You may not even be able to recognize yourself. I know that some of the things I used to do, say, act, and believe are as alien to me today as it would be a person I did not like. It would very much be a person that I no longer cared very much for. That much I can assure you. And yet here I am today. Was it a radical transformation? No, but the first time I did it, I didn't have to drink anymore unless I wanted to. Big, big difference. Some individuals, and that's why some individuals that go back out that have not gone through that part of the process, they end up even worse off than they did before. I ended up worse off the second time, tried it again. I ended up worse off the third time for damn sure. Hell, the fourth time, it was even worse. Oh, the disease progresses. Well, it's not a disease. I'm sorry, but I don't necessarily buy the disease thing. There's something in us that doesn't properly look. There's no. The human body is designed in very specific ways. Now, there may be minute differences of characteristics, but the manner in which the liver processes alcohol doesn't really change unless you got worms. Worms is a problem. But that thought process, that destruction of the ego, the actions of the individual that's thoroughly enmeshed in this thought process of, well, I'm great because I think I am, I'll have another beer. There's a radical counterpart to that. And you see that also with Loki in the fact that he is now tied down with the guts of his son and his girlfriend, not Angerboda, the mother of all these monsters that he fathered, but his girlfriend, Sigyn. I want you to picture this. A big fat dude with Cheeto dust on his belly telling his old lady who looks like she's been rode hard and put up wet, hey, give me another beer. Go on, give me another beer. What's taking so long? How come dinner ain't ready? The whipping post for all of that individual's characteristics. I see men out here all the time who use the women they're in a relationship with as the beating post, the whipping post for their failures. Today, the hot term is, well, he's narcissistic. Yeah, he's just a dick. You don't need to put a fancy term on it. He's not worth being in a relationship with. He's narcissistic. Um, yeah, he's completely engaged in his own thought process. Now, as Loki's tied there with his guts, she's the whipping post because now his ego's not doing him any good, is it? Now he's a victim. Holy cow. He is a victim. The poor guy, he's got to get revenge on everybody, right? He's a victim. He's tied down. His girlfriend's taking the beating for all of his failures, and he's laying there making the world quake every time some venom gets in his eyes. The victim mindset is the flip side of the coin that has heads and tails, ego and victim. And people that are thoroughly entrenched in that own it. They may have a pile of them. They may have a treasury of that shit. But you can watch them. You can watch them and see how they act. Oh, well, my ego didn't do me very well. I must be a victim. This is all everybody else's fault, not mine. Not how I reacted to the situation, not how I engaged in the situation, not how I changed anything. There's no opportunity there for me to grow because this is all somebody else's fault. Bacchus, Dionysus, this radical destruction of transformation, this pure energy of breaking to become something more, is about as clear as it gets. The example of Loki being all that is pretty clear too. And yet those individuals who are thoroughly engaged in that kind of thought process will never share that thought process with you. That's usually why I won't deal with people that say those kinds of things. Well, I really understand Loki and what he's trying to accomplish. Oh, okay. Oh, how so? Right? That's an individual that's wrapped up in their own ego victim mindset. Typically liberals. I see that a lot. Yeah. So step 4 is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We actually write down all the shit we did wrong and why. There you go. I don't think there's anything that we could, everybody's like, well, that's kind of a Christian idea. No, it's not. They got it from a much older pagan tale. There's nothing original about Christianity. So let's get that straight right now. This idea that we take a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves was characterized by the radical destruction of an individual so that he may be reborn and ascend. That's where it comes from. Taking that inventory of ourselves to say, oh, I did this wrong. I hurt that person because I was scared. I stole this because I thought I needed it and they had more than they should have. I stole this because I hate the patriarchy, or I'm going to destroy this and do this because I feel so right in what I'm doing to save the environment or fight for whatever. All of those social things is the group expression of an ego mindset. To get away with all of this grand behavior of destruction because I'm right, because I'm a victim, encouraged and supported by the ego. That's why the world is so crazy, because nobody will address that. That's right there is why the world's so crazy. I don't give a shit if you feel like a victim. Stop being a bitch and man up. All right? We need men to raise children. There's a, why I got to do that? Because I said so. Saw that today. I thought it was very funny. Actually, I think Bill Mayer said it, and I can't stand that guy. He's such a. But so 12 steps, the pagan 12 steps. I don't know how I'm going to call this, but that's the leadership and recovery. That means we have to lead ourselves into a situation where we are willing to write this stuff down. Now, those first 3 steps will help you have the courage to do it. I don't think anybody's ever willing to do it. I think it takes courage to do it. And only the courage can. Only the courageous will do it. The rest of them will be happily content to navigate the rest of their lives with patterns and frameworks they know and they understand until they die, drunk and alone. Which for some people, if they have the courage to accept it, that's fine. But if they continue to cause damage to everyone around them and the world around them, yeah, we got to contend with that. So, this is the reality of it. This is where we need courage, and I feel that in a lot of ways, it's very much lacking in the world. So that is, in a nutshell, what I'm going to write down about the fourth step. Now, excuse me. I'll flesh that out, make it better, write it down, and it'll be amazing. So, anybody got any questions, comments, or concerns? Anything you want to talk about? If not, it's Sunday night. I have a Gothy call this evening at 8 for my Patreon students. And then tomorrow is Monday. The best thing you can do is grab it by the nose and whip its ass. And have the day you deserve. Okie dokie. Everyone have a good night. Thank you all for being here. Like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff. Share it. Make little blip videos out of it, because I'm sure that the news station does. Have a great week, and I will see you again here next Sunday.